Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Studio. First time in 4 weeks, I think. How's the sound? You never really know. It should be okay, but it's always good to get a check on this in advance, rather than find out in the editing room. Hope everybody's doing okay. This is the thank you. This is the I has a sad episode of the Stratosphere Studio, not for any permanent or huge or long lasting reason, but I figured I might as well, especially since I missed the last three. So, uh, yeah, just dive right into it, I guess. Um, I'm having a serious sad because I am actually going through a chemical withdrawal right now. It's the truth. I'm not kidding. Uh, many, I don't know, really, for most of my adult life, I thought I had narcolepsy. I would just fall asleep. There were many times when I would be in the editing room back before I got the job at PJTV, and I could more or less make my own schedule. I'd have a room full of producers, well, four producers behind me on a couch, and I'm at an editing station, a Avid editing station, and I'm falling asleep in the middle of the day while this thing is running, and and it wasn't fun. I really thought I had like some kind of narcolepsy. There's a picture, I didn't pull it. I should have. Picture of me taken about 10 years ago. I went to one of those sleep study things, and I'm just standing there, and I've got like just 30 electrodes hooked up, trying to figure out what was going on. And I thought maybe it was sleep apnea or something like that. They found out I wasn't getting any REM sleep, apparently, and it was gumming up the works. So I got a little tired of falling asleep in the middle of the day and not being able to wake up and all the rest of it. So I don't know how long it's been now. It's been years and years, years and years. I can't even tell you how long it's been. At least 10 years, maybe longer. So for about 10 years, I've been taking Adderall. Adderall is essentially uh, laboratory made amphetamines. I've understood that is, I mean, I'm not an idiot. I know that people buy speed on the street, and Adderall is a highly controlled substance, virtually impossible to get. And I have never understood any of this. I have never seen I guess I've never seen what speed does to people because I've always been starting out from maybe some from so far back behind the starting line. But in any event, I've been on 20 milligrams of Adderall every day for whew, 10 years, 20, 15, I don't know, some long period of time. And bammo, it solved the problem. 20 milligrams in the morning. And occasionally, if I was doing like a long second shift, I might do 10 milligrams in the afternoon. So this is all prescribed by a psychiatrist and all the rest of this stuff. And I was actually really worked. And it does work. But there is no Adderall anymore. It's gone. It's been gone for 10 days, and it's been rare, but it's just gone. And any of these psychoactive medications, if you're going to come off them for whatever reason, you really need to walk yourself down. And I didn't get a chance to do that. It was just I just ran out, and I've been contacting my pharmacy for the last 8 days. We don't have any. Any idea when there will be some? Nope. No idea. None. It's just plain gone. And reason I thought I would bring it up, melatonin helps me sleep. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. MLD on YouTube said try melatonin. I don't have a problem sleeping. In fact, I just had the opposite. I usually just fall asleep like a log. But melatonin has a strange effect on me. Melatonin, I mean 2 milligrams of melatonin, puts me out for a day. I just, bam, I'm out and I can't wake up the next day. I really can't. It's really strange. But reason I thought I'd talk about this, because generally it's just, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining or airing dirty laundry or anything, but I've talked about these kind of things before in the past and thought it might be useful for some people. Uh, I'll tell you what is useful. This is a widely prescribed drug, widely prescribed, and and it's just plain gone. And they're talking about ramping it back, but there are no indications of when that's going to happen. So in this case, it's not like I'm out of insulin. I'm just unable to wake up or focus, and occasionally suicidal thoughts enter my head. But I'm not worried about those. Those I just those are just I just that's the medication talking, or the lack of medication. Um, and TAPS 556 says if you tried going for a jog and doing push-ups, that would solve the problem. I have no doubt that would do 80% of it. I haven't done that because I'm not in any condition to exercise. But here's the thing. Here's why I bring it up. I've done some caffeine helps, but a little too much caffeine makes me sick, and it really just began to realize it's just no, this is just chemical withdrawal. And like I said, I didn't get to wrap myself down. Just stop. That's bad. Makes it much worse. Um, so and Eric says, and that's why every day you must thank God you have a wife to keep you alive. Well, she's in Bali. She's in Bali because her daughter is my stepdaughter is in Bali. Bali, it's a strange place to be. Yeah, stepdaughter Diana lives in Sochi, which is in southern Russia, and I did the um, got out the Google Earth and did the little tape measure thing. They're about 430 miles away from the nearest fighting. That's not hard for Natasha to try to talk her down off of that, try to convince her that there's no particular reason why the Ukrainians would invade Russia and then immediately, lay siege to Sochi. But that's sometimes how some fears and some worries are just irrational, and there's nothing I can do about them anyway. So things got very bad for Diana in Sochi. She's a photographer, and as the sanctions have just gotten worse and worse over the years, those kind of sort of luxury professions go out. But the bottom line is, she'd been married and has been divorced for several years, and there are no men in Sochi anymore. There really aren't any men in Russia anymore. They're just either gone to Ukraine, or they're in the process of training to go to Ukraine, or they got the hell out of Sochi and the rest of the country to not go to Ukraine. So she had a chance to get out. Now, Natasha hadn't seen her for almost 2 years. And Diana got a chance to go to all places, Dubai. She spent New Year's in Dubai. And Natasha and Diana and I have been talking about, where can she go that's not Russia? Turned out there's a lot of Russians living in Bali. Wouldn't have been my first choice or first thought. But Diana got a chance to go to Bali, and that meant that I had to get Natasha to Bali. And Airteki says there's a lot of Russians in Bali, so Bali seemed like a good choice. Natasha loves born in Siberia, spent the last 10 years in Moscow. She likes the warm weather and beaches and all the rest of it. And so she's been in Bali for 9 days and going to be gone for another 2 weeks. If you're going to send somebody to Bali, you don't just go for 3-4 days. So, good news about Bali is it's really quite inexpensive, honestly. Really quite inexpensive. And so that's good. So, Natasha will come back, and then I'm going to find a way to keep Diana in Bali for as long as she wants to be there. And I think it's a 6-month visa. Maybe she'll have to go home and touch base anyway. So, back to the Adderall thing. Um, the the reason I'm so worried about this is because, like I said, this is a widely prescribed medication, and in my case anyway, having battled this since I was, I don't know, 14, I have a lot of coping mechanisms that maybe a lot of younger people don't have, and the thing that concerns me the most is not so much the Adderall shortage, is that medication can simply disappear. Uh, I find that to be alarming. Um, so was the Adderall cold turkey the big personal hit Bill referred to over a week ago? No, it wasn't. Um, the there just isn't any, and that should scare the living daylights out of us. Because if this was insulin instead of Adderall, there'd be in a world of hurt. And I think one of the main manufacturing plants shut down or something. Okay, this should alarm people. It alarmed me when I realized, hey, there we don't have any. Nope, it's gone. When do you expect them? No idea, none. Sylvan Forge says they got a lawyer bill, maybe rid of men mandamus sent to the DEA, who controls all aspects of its scheduled controlled substances. It's tempting to kind of do that, but I always felt like it was wrong to use, whatever personal connections or anything, and just kind of in the same boat as all the rest of American citizens. But yeah, Eric Blake says it sounds a bit medication disappearing off the shelf sounds a bit like the experience I had with the unknown virus of unspecified origin. Um, but I'm deeply alarmed. It is all over the U.S. It is a national emergency, and the fact that there can be a national emergency like this should alarm you, because um, I don't recall anything like this happening. And it's not been like a 2 week shortage. I mean, this thing started disappearing in October. Let's see. Blank Frankie with the super chat says, "Hey Bill, I haven't made the streams for a while. Sorry to hear you're not feeling well. Here's 2/3 of $20 to cheer you up. Thank you very much. It's Australian money, but you can convert it into real money, and that's very kind of you. Actually, thank you very much, Blank Frankie. I'm just joking with you. I love Australia. So what's going on with yeah, and Fire Waco says you're going to need a writ of I've never actually heard the term before, a writ of mandamus for a carton of eggs soon. So what about that, right? I know I don't want to get too much into the political stuff because I've got other entertainment things to talk about, but the price of eggs has gone insane. Why? I saw a report that somebody said that the chicken feed that they were using caused the chickens not to lay any eggs. None. They slow down in the winter, but they said none. And then I just saw this report, and other chicken farmers say, yeah, we are all experiencing the same thing, but the free range chickens are doing okay. I just, everywhere I look, I see signs of stuff that just any one of them individually would be okay. Well, that's just, it's just life. That's just what happens. But I don't know, I, I, I don't know. The official reason is that chickens were facing bird flu. Is that right, Eric? Okay, well, bird flu, I guess. Major epidemic last year that caused a major culling. Okay, it could all be true. Fire at a major egg producing recently. There's been a lot of fires at meat producing, food producing facilities. Anybody else notice that? I hadn't heard it was the avian flu, but in any event, right there are starting to be real shortages. Diesel, we're drawing down the strategic petroleum reserve in order to get the prices low, so that Democrats can crawl over, the next election. And I don't, I don't like the way it looks, and I don't like the way it feels. Uh, and I think the way to solve the problem, in terms of, at least in terms of the medication shortage, is to put Pete Buttigieg on the job, because he's just kicking ass as Secretary of Transportation. Boy, I'll tell you what, that guy gets things done. The country's in the very best of hands, and we've put top men on the problem. Top men. Now, it may be a coincidence, uh, and it certainly wasn't intentional. Let's put it that way. But it's been very difficult for me to concentrate. I was just rolling on these scripts. I got a I got a whole third of a script done in one morning, and then I got more of it done on the trip when I was in Savannah last week. That's why I had to miss last Stratosphere studio. Uh, and now for the last 3 days, I don't even know if I remember how to get home. So it's tough um, for me to concentrate. And a good example of this is I just lost my train of thought. What the hell was it? Oh, I remember. It's going to be a lot of that tonight, I reckon. Uh, so I suspect just completely randomly, just through since I wasn't able to really write much of anything, I guess just as a result of me watching a lot of YouTube because I just don't watch TV. You go down one rabbit hole and it leads you to another rabbit hole, and the rabbit hole I've been in for the last 24 hours is probably not helping my mood any, I guess. Um, is the Beach Boys, and and I love the Beach Boys, and I've always loved the Beach Boys. I was a senior in high school in 1977, and that would have been about 10 years, 7, 8 years after their peak. So there was a big Beach Boys revival when I was a senior in high school, and so they were playing it everywhere. And I've said "Fun, Fun, Fun" ought to be the national anthem, and I stick by that. And and so I guess the way I ended up getting to where I was going was I somehow or another I got to look at the backing tracks for Sloop John B, and I knew that there was all these sessions from Pet Sounds, and so I looked at that, and then I looked at all these, and I actually stumbled upon a clip from was it Love and Mercy, um, the biopic where Paul Dano plays Brian Wilson, and so I listened to a bunch of Beach Boys music, and then I started getting more into the sort of the history of the Beach Boys. And then I saw a couple things last night, and then today I watched a 2 hour documentary on the Beach Boys. And even before, because I didn't know an awful lot about the history of the band, I knew I knew Brian Wilson was nuts, and I knew about the psychiatrist who controlled him, and I knew about the Wrecking Crew too, and I knew that the Wrecking Crew, just for those of you unfamiliar with it, there's a great documentary out about the Wrecking Crew. It's a bunch of studio musicians who got together just randomly. There wasn't like a set Wrecking Crew, but there were probably 20 guys, maybe 30 at the outside who would routinely, get called in to do these studio sessions. And virtually every uh, album most every album from the 60s and 70s is played by these guys, right? I mean, it's just incredible what the guy who did the theme from Bonanza, you know, he just he just sat down and did it. So I got a lot of sympathy for Brian Wilson, a lot. And I had never heard really. I know the band had been broken up and that there were all kinds of different things, and like I said, I knew the outside of it. But I love the music so much, and it's just so the sads about the Beach Boys is two part. The easy one is to look at what California was when the Beach Boys were really at their peak. I don't think that's ever. I mean, look, I certainly know it's not the case anymore, but that I had that Californiitis real bad, and I'm still kind of trying to recover from it. But looking back at those times in 66, 67, somewhere in there, and what was going on in California and how far it has fallen, and how it's just basically the antithesis of what it used to be. All of the big ideas came out of California in those days. We had California was where all the aerospace was, and they made movies in Hollywood back then. And and I came out here to do the movie, so there was always that Hollywood allure. But in the back of my head, there was always, man, I'm going to Beach Boys land. I'm going to where it's surf and safari. And this is an absolutely true story, by the way. I got off the plane. My friend Fritz Bronner was out here a year before me, and I flew out here for the first time, and I landed around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 4:30, we were out at Ventura County Line in wetsuits on boogie boards, and I'm watching the sun set over the Pacific. And I said, I just gotta move here, man. I wonder if they'll let me. Um, Pacific tasted. I'd grown up around the Atlantic in Bermuda and Florida since I was before I was 4, and and I just loved it. Somebody mentioned leaving California, and where did I put it? Hang on. My brother Steve sent me this, who had lived out here himself. Let me find it for you. I put it on my Facebook page, but it's worth a redo. Of course, if I do, I'm going to end up spending all night. Look, I forget it. I don't need to show it to you. It's a picture of the Beverly Hillbillies in the truck, and then it's captioned, and it says they said California is the place you gotta flee, so they loaded up the truck and moved back to Tennessee. Yeah. Um, but it's just heartbreaking to look at what California used to be, and that hurts. There's a place called Paradise Cove that Natasha and I like to go to. It's a tiny, tiny little inlet on the Pacific coast, and it's all done up in surfer stuff. They're remodeling it, so I'm sure they'll take all of the life out of it. But that place is, you can go to Paradise Cove, and it's right on the beach, and you can get a cheeseburger there, and you can just kind of pick up a little bit of the vibe. Thank you very much. Starla says Bacopa Monieri is a natural alternative to Adderall. She sounds lovely, whoever she is, and I'll, since Wipe's on the other side of the planet, I'll be sure to look her up and give her a call. Thank you. So anyway, that whole thing was sad. Then I got into the whole Beach Boys thing, and especially into Brian Wilson and the feuds and stuff, because we're coming off of obviously I'm not going to bring this up again, but we're coming off of a feud. Edward Smith, hold on to that thought. Please bring that back. You know how easy it is for me to fall off the rails when I'm feeling sharp. Not feeling sharp today, but I'd love to talk about that question. The question is, what do I think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Want to talk about that in a big way. But anyway, back to the Beach Boys. So I'd watched the Beach Boys in videos and performing, and I had always thought that Mike Love was just a dick. You know, I didn't know anything about the backstory. Didn't know anything about what's going on off stage. I just thought whenever he was on camera, he was just being a dick, and everything about him was about look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. All of his hand gestures and all of this weird stuff he was doing was just, my God. I look at this guy and say, what an absolute egomaniac. What a just me, and I'll do weird whatever I have to do in order to get people to look at me. That's what I'll do. And I always thought that about him. And then you start hearing the story about the band and all of this stuff, and I thought, well, maybe I'm overreacting. And then I saw the induction of the Beach Boys into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Brian Wilson, who's an absolute musical genius, I have an enormous amount of sympathy for. And respect and admiration for, and I love his music. And I knew how shy he was, how pathologically, painfully shy he was. I knew he'd been, really mentally disturbed for a long time. And he comes to the Hall of Fame induction, and he's reading a piece of paper, and he's stumbling through it. Right, he's not he doesn't even get to hide behind his songs. He just wrote out something thanking everybody and so on. He's just flipping through this 2-page thing, and right smack in the middle of his sentence, Mike Love has to get himself in the frame, standing right behind Brian the whole time, kind of playing with his hair. Then Mike Love has to walk over, and right in the middle of a word, he just adjusts the microphone, and puts it right in front of him and stuff, and it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I thought, wow, that's pretty bad, because the title of the YouTube clip was Mike Love ruining the Beach Boys induction ceremony. I thought, yeah, that's pretty low. But then, after everybody said something, Brian reads his speech. Everybody else says, hey, it's just great to be here. Thank you very much, and Al Jardine and Dennis had died by then, but Carl was still around. And just when you think it's all over, Mike Love gets out there and starts going off about not only about him and how great the Beach Boys are. he starts calling out the Beatles. He says, we do 200 shows a year. I'd like to see the Mop Tops try that. I dare them. And Mick Jagger out there, running around, and he couldn't sing Good Vibrations if his life depended on it, that kind of thing. And you could just hear the audience just like going, oh, a little boo, and and yeah, and Elton, sorry, Swen. Sven Nasirema Will. Sven Nasirema Will. Sorry, I'm going to go with Will. Did you see Elton John's reaction at the end? Elton John introduced him. And I think at the end of it, Elton John said, I'm glad he didn't say shit about me, something like that. So, so I'm just trying to think, Sven. Is it Sven or Sven? So I'm going to go with Sven. Okay, Sven. Um, and I'm just thinking there was no camera on Brian. He might have left the stage, but what that must have just ripped his guts out. And every time I see Mike Love, I just can't stand the guy. Especially if you watch the studio sessions, he's always bitching and complaining. And they did in Love and Mercy, they did the recording of yeah, he called Mick Jagger chicken shit. Yeah, yeah, that's in front of musicians, right at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the induction of the Beach Boys. And I had long ago seen the Pet Sounds sessions, recovered the video of the Pet Sounds. I've got the audio of it on my phone. Um, and 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 both in the actual documentary sessions and in Love and Mercy, Mike is just sitting there complaining. It's like we're doing. Brian's doing like take 32 with the cellos or something because he's using cellos as percussion. You know, and and he's like, all right, let's do it again. And it's like, God damn it, Brian, we've done this 32 times. And Brian just says, Mike, if you don't want to be here, you're welcome to leave. Let's back to the cellos. And you watch Brian Wilson work. You watch what he's doing. You listen to what he's doing. I don't have a strong musical background. I know enough about, I guess enough about it to talk a little bit about it. Don't be an idiot about music. Talk about it. But watching Brian Wilson talk to the cellist, the professional cellist, I guess they were all part of the wrecking crew, and they're doing the whoop, 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 whoop. And he says, I know I needed to be sharper than that. You guys are the percussion section now. That's what he said. You're the rhythm section. So it needs to be whoop, 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 whoop. And it's like, what? He's asking the guitar player to play or a bass player to play, was one of the women who in the wrecking crew said, I want you to play this in like a different key. She says, it doesn't make any sense. It makes sense in my head. Try it. So she tries it and it's wonderful. And so you've got this guy who's just so shy and bright and tormented and brilliant, and then his cousin Mike Love is just an arrogant, vain, nasty narcissist. And I don't know how much of this is due to this. I'll bet you there's a significant amount of it. Everybody in the band is all looking, every album cover, every performance, everybody's looking, they got the 60s haircuts, except for Mike Love, who's always wearing a cap, always. It's because he started losing his hair in high school, right? And I can't help but think that has something to do with it. Anyway, so you're at the point now where Mike Love, and they hired, was it Brian Johnson? They hired a guy to sing, because when Brian wouldn't go on the road or couldn't anymore, hired another guy to sing. He wasn't one of the Wilsons, and it wasn't Al Jardine, and it wasn't Mike Love. So they hired a new guy. I would say Brian. No. Anyway, so Mike Love sues Brian Wilson, and now Mike Love and this other guy, and it'll come up in a second. Bruce, he seemed like an okay guy. Bruce Johnson, thank you. Now, Mike Love and Bruce Johnson Mike Love owns the name Beach Boys. He owns it. It's his. Brian Wilson can't go out and be part of the Beach Boys. And Al Jardine went out and wanted and was calling himself Al Jardine of the Beach Boys or the Beach Boys family with Al Jardine, something like that. Mike Love sued him and said, nope, you don't get to say anything about the Beach Boys in your name, Al. You know, it's just so low. And Brian now, and even he once he started doing the drugs, he was just he put a sandlot inside his apartment, inside his house, and then somewhere in the corner he had an Indian teepee, and in there is where they did all the acid and all the drugs, and and Brian got cooked, and he's better, but he's not fully here. You watch him now. And so they're saying, so you got Al Jardine out there touring, you got Bruce and Mike Love out there touring. Dennis drowned in late '60s. Then Carl died of lung cancer, and then Brian is out there with Brian was out and he was listening to a band that was the Wonderkins, the Wonder Buttons, something like that. He's out there and he just catches this band that's like playing Beach Boys cover band, and he says, "You guys are great. You want to come out on the road with me?" I said, "Yeah, we'll be happy to come out on the road with you, Brian Wilson." So you got all three of these guys out there touring now, right? So the big question is, wow, are they ever going to get together? And this is all still pretty old news. And Al says, "I'd love to." Brian Wilson was my best friend. We were the Oneaters, yeah. The Oneaters. That's an inside joke for those of you who ever see that thing you do. It's the Wondermints. Great. So Al says, I'd love to. I'd love to go out on tour with them again. I don't know how to reach Brian anymore. I don't think he wasn't taking my calls. And then they asked Mike Love, would you be willing to do it? Well, if Brian is in for it, I think it'd be great. We're going to have a genuine Beach Boys reunion. Then they asked Brian Wilson if he wants to go out and sing with the surviving members of the band. He said, no, not a chance. I said, can you say why, Brian? Interview's off camera. And he says, because I don't like Mike Love. I can't stand him. I can take 5 minutes with him and that's it. Everything about him is just so ego oriented and so, I just no, not going to do it. And it's just, you want to say, oh, it's just really too bad and you wish it didn't happen. And there's a lot of that. But he also comes back to a thing that Peter Bart and Peter Guber have talked about, and Critical Drinker's done one or two of these things. And that is that in many cases, the best product comes from a very stressful set. The Godfather was no fun to be on, and neither was Apocalypse Now, and a bunch of other great movies were just horrible to be with. Island of Dr. Moreau was a horrible set too, and that was garbage, so it's not a guarantee or anything. Eric says he's very curious to know what Mike's side of the story is. Well, I've heard Mike's side of the story. Mike claims that he wrote everything, and he did apparently win a lawsuit against Brian for not getting adequate credit and all this stuff. But to me, you just have to watch the guy. And I don't know what makes me say this, except I guess it makes sense. Do you know who Mike Love actually reminds me of? This will probably blow your mind. But I'd be curious to know how many people watching the show live see this. I'm watching Mike Love doing what he's doing, and he reminds me of Buzz Aldrin. He reminds me of Buzz Aldrin. There's something about their characters that's very similar. Especially if you compare Buzz Aldrin with Neil Armstrong, and then you can compare Mike Love to Brian Wilson. No, that's not a bad entertainment. That's for Stratosphere Studios. That's actually not a bad point. The dynamic is very similar, right? You got the guys. Look. Mike Love has got talent. He said, and I believe it. Mike Love sat down and he wrote the lyrics for Good Vibrations. He said he did it in a half hour. That actually seems to be true. And that's a brilliant song. But You know what? It's probably the reason I think these two guys are why I see them both. Um, and I think probably what it is that both of them, Buzz and Mike Love, are talented guys who, on their own, uh, would probably be superstars, but they're not on their own. They both of them live in the shadow, not only of somebody more talented than they are, but somebody much more not so flawed. Neil Armstrong wrote a letter to every single Eagle Scout that ever became an Eagle Scout. After he got back from the moon, he wrote them a personal handwritten letter to every single one of them. And when he found out that people were selling his autographs or making money off of forging his autographs, he stopped giving autographs. Neil Armstrong could have made a fortune on autographs, and he stopped doing it because he didn't want other people to rip people off. And then Buzz Aldrin is the kind of guy who will open a 7-Eleven and he'll charge $20 an autograph. They're just similar in that way. I suspect that it's just that it's got to be a terrible place to be, that second place thing. I give Buzz a lot more of a break than I do Mike Love. Buzz Aldrin's dad was so. Think about this, kids. Uh, when when Buzz Aldrin came back from the moon landing, his dad said to him, "Oh, second guy on the moon." Nobody remembers the second guy on the moon. That's got to be rough. But Buzz is not a good guy. I know a lot of people who knew a lot of the Apollo guys, and not one person had anything less than, you know, a sense of wonder when it comes time to talk about Neil Armstrong and his humility and his unbelievable talent and his grace. That's the word. And I never heard a single person say a nice thing about Buzz Aldrin. I never heard anybody say a nice thing about Chuck Yeager. I never heard anybody say a nice thing about William Shatner. Uh, yeah, we can name. Dave Big Booty says we can name the fourth guy on the moon. That would have been Alan Bean, I reckon. Um, yeah, thanks, Edward. Uh, in fact, probably now is a pretty good time. So anyway, it's just painful to watch, and I've always been interested in this. Natasha and I talk about this quite a bit. The sense that when you get to like stratospheric levels of real brilliance, uh, it seems almost universal that it comes with severe mental and emotional problems, and I don't believe that's a coincidence. And I don't believe that it's the entertainment business that makes them nuts. I think there's something about nutty people that allows them to put thoughts together in a way that regular people don't, and they pay a very high price for it. And I'm on the outskirts of this. I don't want to compare myself to any of those people because they're genuine geniuses. But there is something about um, there's something about emotional and psychological pain and uh, instability that correlates to creative uh, ability. It's not 100% correlation. There's some very creative people who seem to have themselves really completely grounded, and God knows there's a lot of nutty people that can't do anything. But nevertheless, I don't know. Two people were saying that they got a chance to shake Neil Armstrong's hand. Air Tucky and Aesop's Retreat. I envy you. I wish I could have met him. He's one of my three heroes, and I remember where I was when I heard the news he had died. Um, uh, Can you believe the comedian actor once played a starship captain that inspired Kirk and Pike? Yes, absolutely. Leslie Nielsen in Forbidden Planet. There's no question about that. You look at Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet is there's an awful lot of Star Trek in Forbidden Planet. They don't use the transporters for transport, but they do get into these tubes, and then there's like a field. It's I think it's helping them decelerate or something like that. Yeah, and all the uniforms, and there's a lot of Star Trek, especially the original pilot of Star Trek, comes from Forbidden Planet. And Forbidden Planet is just such an astonishing movie. Dave Big Booty says they had the replicator. I didn't know that. But Forbidden Planet is such an amazing movie. We've talked about this years ago. I don't know why that film hasn't been remade. So many other garbage films have been remade, but that film is deep. It is a deep, deep, serious, excellent science fiction examination, and on top of it, it's spectacular. And on top of that, it's an action movie. I can't believe that they have not remade Forbidden Planet. I'd love to remake Forbidden Planet. I would love to do it. Um, Phil Trick remembers that we did a planetarium show called Forbidden Planet. And I don't remember why we called it Forbidden Planet. It was something about Earth. It was one of Jack Horkheimer's earliest shows. The thing I remember most about Forbidden Planet was it had the used the music from Andromeda Strain, that that's what I remember about Forbidden Planet. And Forbidden Planet had an amazing had an amazing fly through the solar system, which virtually every planetarium show had at the time. And they did that to a song called "Teach Me How to Fly" by Rotary Connection. Anybody who knows that song will impress me fantastically. I love that song. Um, and that's a hard song. That's a hard track to find. I had to go to like some Russian music site to find "Teach Me How to Fly" by Rotary Connection. But anyway, back to the question that I wanted to talk about here. Um, Somebody asked, what did I think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? And I thought that's a strange connection to make, but it's actually not. Uh, Dennis Wilson, uh, who was kind of like the quietest guy, he was the drummer, he was the only actual surfer. And in the late 60s, he had a gigantic beach house, and he was just picking up girls left and right. I mean, he was just a chick magnet. And I think he picked up and took these two girls home, and they talked about this guy who was like really deep because all of these musicians were getting into things like transcendental meditation and all the rest of it. And so he invites these two girls over and to bring this guru, and this guy is apparently a songwriter and stuff, so they invite him over. He's kind of a weird guy, but he sits down and starts putting out some really bizarre but interesting lyrics, and this guy's name is Charlie Manson. Uh, and Charlie writes a song that Dennis Wilson records, uh, and I forget it. I forget what the exact lyric is. I think Manson's lyric is "Come on, girl, stop existing," something very similar to that. And Dennis Wilson changed it to come on, girl, stop resisting." And Charlie wasn't too happy about that. Uh, is that? Wait, hang on a second. CP Tomes put a link. Is that? Oh my God, you found it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. It never occurred to me to look for that on YouTube. It's a look. It's a '70s song, and most people aren't going to like it. But I just remember how much we loved that planet sequence, flying through the solar system on Forbidden Planet with "Teach Me How to Fly." It was just cool. Uh, yeah, I don't think most people will like it. I just loved it. All right. So anyway, Manson then threatened to kill Dennis and kill his family. He basically said, pulled a bullet out and showed it to him and said, this has got your kid's name on it, that kind of thing. So I guess that's where we got the question about can you talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Tap says the 70s. You mean the 1770s? Yeah, it sounds that old. It's got a slide whistle in it. And it's got like lead slide whistle. Uh, anyway, so for those of you who have not seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, uh, Leonardo DiCaprio plays a Hollywood movie star, fading movie star by the time you get to the late 60s. And Brad Pitt is his best friend and stunt double. And the whole movie takes place in the days prior to the Manson murders. And I knew the Manson, the Tate LaBianca murders is one of the many things that I have done a deep dive into. Sometimes I find things that um, they just fascinate me, and I want to know everything there is about them. And the Tate LaBianca murders were one of them. I remember watching Helter Skelter, a TV movie when I was a kid, and the second I was done watching it, I went out and bought a three-piece suit because I wanted to look like Vincent Bugliosi, who was the guy who ended up prosecuting Manson, getting the conviction. Because Charlie didn't kill anybody with his own hands; he sent his people out. So to get Charlie on first-degree murder, you had to basically show the control of you. So Vincent Bugliosi did that. Was pretty impressive. Anyway, so since I knew what was going on, and since the movie was following Sharon Tate, as you got closer and closer and closer to this night, anybody who knew anything about the story, and I knew a lot about the story, just felt this kind of sickness, coming on. Because in the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio is the neighbor of Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, his wife, and Roman's shooting a movie in Europe, and she's got four other guests in the house, and you spend a lot of time in this movie with the Manson family. You meet Squeaky Fromm and I used to know all the names of them. These lunatics. And Manson's there, and Tex, what's his name, is there, and they're staying out at a place, Something Ranch, which is just up the road from me here, where it used to be. It's like a movie set, Western set. Is it Spalding Ranch? Maybe something like that. Anyway, so here comes all of the events. Everything's been leading up to this, right? And now you're on the night of the murders. Tex Watson, yeah, thanks. And and you see them coming up, and here's Tex, and he's got his gun, and here are the two other three of the other chicks, and they've got their knives, and they're going to go up, and we know what we're going to do. We've already met Sharon Tate and all of her friends, and you're watching this with this sense like, here it comes, here it comes. Just like every other Hollywood movie ever made, now I'm going to end up feeling really bad because, thank you, Chase. I'll get to that in a second if I can for both of those. Spawn Ranch, thanks. Spawn, yeah. So anyway, so here it comes, and and they break into Leonardo DiCaprio's house, and Brad Pitt is there, and there's Tex with his knife, and here's like Squeaky Fromm or one of them, and she starts advancing, and you think, oh great, now Brad Pitt's going to get knifed by this guy, but he takes like, I don't know if it's a telephone or a brick, and he throws it at her as hard as he can, just smashes her mouth in, right? Just knocks all her teeth in and breaks her nose. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? And then he gets into this knife fight with Tex and ends up killing him. And then the Krenwinkel, the looniest of the bunch, right? She's the one who's going to go up and hack these people to bits. We've already set up earlier in the thing that Leonardo DiCaprio got to keep a flamethrower from a movie that he did earlier. He's got an operational flamethrower in his garage. And so the most lunatic chick in the entire Manson family is outside with Leonardo DiCaprio, and instead of going up and hacking Sharon Tate to bits, she goes into the pool, and the next thing you know, Leonardo DiCaprio comes out, and he's got a flamethrower on her, and she just burns to death. And once I realized what was going on, I realized for yet again that Tarantino is an absolute genius, not just because he writes such great dialogues, dialogue. Because I don't know if any other film director has the confidence of Quentin Tarantino. Um, but watching that was like, here's the thing about Quentin Tarantino, right? He's like, Quentin Tarantino has the courage, the moral courage to give the audience what they want instead of what his intellectual drinking buddies think that they want. Instead of giving you this feel sick to your stomach ending, he gives you exactly what you want. I've been sitting here looking at these Manson murderers for what, 60 years almost? No, 50. And 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 now I get to see what should have happened, right? Cameron C says that he had the balls to kill Hitler in a World War II movie. So that scene in Inglorious Bastards where he ends up killing Hitler and stuff. I thought, what's going on there? I'm not quite sure about that. But when he did it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, wow. And there's one thing, Natasha grew up watching American movies, and she's I got a chance to introduce her to James Woods. The movie that they allowed them to show was Once Upon a Time in America. So she met James Woods. I was like, wow. And there's a scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where it's the night of the murder, and Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt go into this restaurant to have a bite, and they go to Casa Vega, which is about maybe a quarter mile from my house. Natasha and I walk to Casa Vega a lot. Um, and that's a strange, cool feeling to see these guys like walking through this door that Casa Vega is this really ornate, heavy black door. I'm watching those guys in there, and then they're in the corner. And then after we saw the movie, went to Casa Vega a couple nights later. It's like they're sitting right there, Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. It's almost impossible to not be affected by that kind of star power. But anyway, it was just great, and getting questions here from DKS 13827 saying, that Terry Melcher lived there, right? And Mark Lindsay. I know those names. Is that at the La Bianca house? I mean, I'm sorry, at the Tate house, because that house was there until very recently. They just demolished it not too long ago. Um, but it had people living in it afterwards as well. Um, but yeah, Edward Smith has a great point here. He says Tarantino's characters may drink too much and take too many drugs, but they know right from wrong. That's actually a really profound thing. They do know right from wrong. So anyway, uh, a lot of people think that after the murders, Dennis Wilson just started drinking. He had a drinking problem before that, but he just started drinking, couldn't stop. And people who know him said that one of the reasons he was drinking so heavily was because he introduced Charlie Manson to the Hollywood scene, and he felt responsible for it. It's just a lot of tragedy in there for people that wrote such, you know, wholesome is not the word I really want to apply to a band, but it was just clean. It was clean. It was clean music. Um, and then in the movie, Tarantino gives you, and at the end of it, by the way, after it's all over, after all the Manson guys are nuts, Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, comes walking down the driveway and says, "Well, what happened? A little disturbance," and get the feeling maybe they're gonna, maybe she's gonna, she's okay. Everybody up there's fine. They're not lying on their yards with, you know, um, all of a sudden. Melcher the guy? Melcher was the guy who was the music producer that Charlie was after, right? That had made some sort of general sort of, yeah, maybe we can work something out, kind of brush you off, kind of kind of thing, and then Charlie took that to mean that it was a guaranteed contract. Was that Melcher? I think Charlie Manson. By the way, this I can show you. Um, I am at the point now in the Empire of Terror stuff where I'm writing about the death of Lenin. Take a look at this. This will blow your mind. I'm curious to know if anybody else sees this besides me. All right. Okay, so Lenin, guy who started the communist revolution, architect of all of that murder. Um, he had a stroke, his first stroke in 1922, I think, and then a couple of other strokes. On this series that I'm doing, this Empire of Terror series, I've got a chance to name each episode, and then I also have a chance to, for the first time ever, I've named chapters, and I love that because you got to break up this murder somehow. So, so the final chapter in script 5, which I'm just finishing now, is called Tink Tink Tink. I've had all kinds of cool names for different chapters, and one was called. No, anyway, Tink Tink Tink. So the reason I called it Tink 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 is because Lenin had a stroke in 22, and he had like a double stroke, and then he had a real bad one. And for the last 2 years of his life, the leader of the Soviet Union was asked to multiply 12 times 7, and it took him 3 hours to do it by adding 7 12 times. It took him 3 hours to do that. And so when he died, they said that they had to have his brain removed because obviously it's the inventor of communism must have an incredibly developed brain, so they took it out. And somebody saw it and said it left one hemisphere looked completely normal. Said the other hemisphere was the size of a walnut, right? This big, and it was hanging by what looked like ribbons. They said his arteries in his brain were so calcified that they couldn't get a human hair through some of them, and that when they did the autopsy on him, they took a pair of tweezers. These are the cerebral arteries, and they went touched it, and when they hit the arteries in his head, it went tink 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 because there was so much calcium, and his arteries had become so just completely clogged. So this was a state secret for the history of the Soviet Union. And Lenin's last 10 months was just a complete vegetable. He could make one sound. He could go that's it. So they were going to do a portrait of Lenin. They sent a painter. I think it was a painter. Yeah, sent a painter to do a portrait of Lenin. And the second that they saw Lenin, they said, "No, we can't do this because he's so." Here's the last photograph ever taken of Vladimir Lenin, and you tell me if he reminds you of anybody. Because he reminds me of somebody. Let me see if I can just make him a little bit bigger there. Any guesses? Yes. Dwayne Gates for the win. He looks exactly like Charlie Manson to me. Exactly. He has that same, his eyes are the same shape, and he's got that wide-eyed kind of nutcase look. I think he looks exactly like Charlie Manson. gets a little bigger here, just so we can see, because I think it's uncanny. And I remember the first time I saw this picture, I thought, wow, that looks like Charlie Manson. The reason he's got those looks is because those looks in his eyes, because his brain's gone, completely just gone. Yeah, Fetterman look and Nancy Pelosi coming up in the comments, AOC, all of that stuff. But that's what it looks like when your brain is not functioning correctly. And Air Techie says both were evil, murderous psychopaths. Exactly right. Manson was responsible for 5 people dying at the Tate House and another 2 at the La Bianca, so that's 7 people. And so in round numbers, Vladimir Lenin outkilled Charlie Manson by about 1,000,000 to 1. About 1,000,000 to 1. Lenin is directly responsible for probably 5, 6, 7 million people being killed. So he's the GOAT. All right, so a couple other things to talk about and show you real quick. I've been talking about this forever, and I was completely changing subjects now. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the colonies. I haven't seen Marusha Dark here tonight, which is a shame because maybe she's just being quiet, but I doubt it, because I know this is the kind of thing she likes to talk about, but I'm sure she'll watch the recording of this. So when I was talking about the colonies, it's like you need adversaries. Hey, Air Techie says, any updates on the colonies? We got about a 20-second delay here. So yes, we do. And I talked about needing enemies. You just do, just for the sake of conflict. And we're going to be, the Chinese are going to be there. The actual Chinese, not going to be Romulans or anything. The actual Chinese, and you got to fight your own government too. So there's all of that. But I wanted something that felt like aliens. And many episodes ago, I'm sure this was before we started Stratosphere Studio Show, many episodes ago, got in a big discussion about this, and I have been growing every month. I hear some new piece of data that convinces me that while life is conceivably, possibly very widespread, the more I learn about the astonishing number of extremely rare things that have to happen in order to have intelligence. Kafers. Don't start me on Kafers, Air Tech yet. Now, Kafers are the greatest aliens I ever met. I'm going to do the Kafers. I talked to Mark Miller about them. Kafers are an alien from Traveler 2300. I'm not going to make them spacefaring because I can't pull it off, but I'm going to have them there because they're just fantastic. So look, my attitude is, I don't think that there's, I think intelligent life, look, you got trillions of stars, so obviously the planets, so obviously there's going to be some intelligent life, but I don't think it's very rare. And I did see the grabby aliens thing too, that whole argument. So I think that intelligent life is exceedingly rare. Let me rephrase that. Technological societies, exceedingly rare. Exceedingly. And every time you have aliens in a science fiction story, they're at almost precisely exactly the same tech level as us. And that's four levels of coincidence past where I want to go. I'm not even going to have them run into a technological society, but the idea that these two species would not only run into each other, but would run into each other at precisely the same tech level, exactly the same tech level. Because if they're not, it's not a fight, right? It's like, you take the United States Air Force against the Vikings. It doesn't matter how tough the Vikings are, right? If you take the United States Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Army, the Vikings are going to get wiped out, and very likely we won't take a single casualty. That's what happens when you've got 1,300 years of technology advancement. So all of that to say, I am not going to do aliens because I find them exceedingly unlikely, and I'm certainly not going to use aliens as a technological adversary because that's unlikely cubed. Now, what am I going to do? Well, I talked about this before. I'm going to split humanity three ways, the human species. One branch will be unaltered, just because of what happened. They just don't want to go down either of these other two paths. One path is going to be the path of cybernetic enhancements, and these are going to be the people because number one, I find it feasible, and number two, it's just cool. That whole William Gibson 1980s burning chrome count zero uh, typical cyber future that is that Ridley Scott designed. I mean, Ridley Scott designed the future. Every spaceship now, and every colony now, every base, it all looks exactly the same as Blade Runner or Aliens, right? Alien, dark, you know, on board the Nostromo, dark, steam issuing, a lot of metal, things just dripping, just this kind of nasty pre-industrial, early industrial age thing. So he invented the future, but I do like the cybernetic things a lot. And then I said the other thing was that I wanted to do was I wanted to take the third branch, and this branch decides to go full on genetic modification of their own DNA. And had a discussion about that many months ago about I don't want them to look human. But they have to look human because they are. And I'd been inspired to this idea by images that I saw, man, back in 2005 or 6, so, pretty near 20 years ago. And I knew I had them somewhere. Anyway, I found them. And there's two of them. So I will share them with you now. Because these are the things that convinced me that you could do a human alien and have it look alien and still not have to eat the whole, unlikelihood of it. So where are we here? One moment, please. One moment. This one. Yeah. All right. Looking at this picture, I got to warn you, I'd forgotten how unnerving and disturbing these images are. So I'm serious. If you're watching this recorded or if you're watching it live, almost everybody watches it recorded. You really might want to, it's not obscene or anything. It's just damn disturbing. Okay, I don't know who this artist is, but I saw these pictures almost 20 years ago, and this is what made me believe. So I've got two of them, and this is what that branch of humanity that decides they're going to go off and just custom design they're not only going to custom design their physical features, going to custom design their psychology, right? They're going to, instead of looking for big open planets to live on, they said, wouldn't it just be easier to create a genetic human who doesn't want to do anything outdoors? The only time they feel comfortable is inside a small pressurized tube. Wouldn't that be easier? Yeah. Super mutants, Eric Blake says. Okay, so here they are. There's two images, two renderings of the same super mutant. You've been warned. Here's the first one. Now, to me, that is creepy AF. I mean, really, really, really disturbing. And it looks like an alien. Eric's like he says I went to high school with her. Well done. Well played. It gives you all of that creepiness of an alien, but you can also see that could be human stock, genetically modified stock. So here's a second rendering. Same creature, and this one looks even more human. Take a look at this. that works for me. That really does. So, I mean, you look at the hands on this. I don't know whether the artist was trying to do that or not, but he got the eyes right. The eyes look human, and the nose. I'll get to the nose in a second. You notice he's got 5 fingers, right? So you're basically taking human stock. Hey, first time chat from Apotify saying, WTF is this? Well, I was just talking about how in the Colony series I want to have spacefaring adversaries, but I don't want to have an alien race because the idea of meeting one in the first place is essentially zero, and meeting one that's the exact same tech level as you so you can fight them uh, is zero squared. Now, that's an interesting point. Texican says, I think tiny teeth would be even creepier. Yes, looks like a bird. All of these things are true, but here's what's interesting to me, most interesting to me about this creature, right? And this got me thinking about a lot of different things. Really, really, really got me thinking, these images. I'm going to zoom them up a little bit. Okay, so now, it's funny how we talked about this in role playing games. How if you have like somebody, you roll out a character and he's got super high intelligence and super low education, or vice versa, you have to kind of think of a way to make that work. I look at this character, and I kind of agree. Actually, smaller teeth might be more interesting. But I look at this character, this creature, and I say he looks like a human because it does strike me as a genetically modified human, and there's no nose, right? So why would you do that? And those are AI renderings, yeah. And I realized that the thing I like most about this guy is if you live in space, there's a science fiction novel called The Chemically Pure Warriors, I think, about if you live in space, you never go down on a planet ever. You never ever go down on a planet. Your entire existence is spent in vacuum. Then you don't need a nose. The nose filters dirt and also prevents rain from going into your head. And so this is a creature that never ever goes outside. Wes Kegel says if he has no nose, how does he smell? Well, it turns out that he's still got the nose. All of the smell organs are inside your head. The nose is just the fleshy kind of the awning that keeps dirt out and rain out. So he actually gets rid of the nose so he can smell more effectively. And this is when I really started to run with this idea, because then I realized that in order to do this to yourself, you have to have a psychology. Your psychology would have to be different. And what the psychology would do, look out for the sneeze, says Aesop's Retreat. That's a funny line, but he doesn't sneeze. The reason he doesn't sneeze is because there's no pathogens, there's no irritants, there's no pollen, there's no nothing to make you sneeze. This is a character, this is a creature that lives in a completely 100% sterilized, processed environment where viral level, well, there are no viruses. The entire species lives in artificial environments where there simply is no infection. There are no viruses in the air. They're all filtered out. They're all gone. There are no viruses. There's no bacteria. They never get sick, of course, because there are no pathogens. But basically, if you get them out of this environment, then they drop dead immediately because their immune system is basically gone to hell. But I started thinking, why would you do that? And I thought, maybe you would be able to smell a little better. And I realized, no, a better answer is that it's the psychology that drives the face rather than the face driving the psychology. And that's maybe why the big teeth are there. I don't know. What I'm getting at here, let me turn these off so you can see me emoting, because that's what people are obviously paying for. There I am. Okay. So why would you do that? It's repulsive, but it's repulsive to us. So why isn't it repulsive to them? Wes Kegel says, in order to buy into this character, I'd need some kind of explanation as to why what's been done to it is advantageous. Well, that's exactly what I'm in the process of saying. over time, over a century or so, Airteki says they want to separate themselves from humanity. Yes, they do, but I think the psychology that drives this is we are going to go for we're going to remove everything that was part of a planet bound existence. We don't need the nose, so we're not going to grow a nose. Uh, we're, we need very, very thin arms and legs and stuff because we live in a zero G environment or whatever the case may be. We don't need anything, and if they don't need it, they get rid of it. Um, they've got their, if you notice, their skull is showing through. Not that one. Uh, okay, it's like the skin and the bone have become the same kind of thing. Well, that's because there's no infection, right? So, so basically, what they're doing is they're kind of their entire psychology is giving a finger to baseline humans. In their mind, they see us the way that some of these people that are just going home from the World Economic Forum, that we're just these filthy, germ covered, hairy, filthy, cell shedding, walking biology parks that are just swimming with bacteria, because we all are. And they want nothing to do with it. They have a sterile mindset. That's probably where I'm going with this. They have a they have a pathological hatred of not of human biology, but of anything that's not human biology. There are no bacteria on their ships. There are no viruses. There are no parasites. They are they are proud of the fact that they have they think the entire idea of traveling long distances to find an environment much like the Earth is insane. They say we've got spacefaring technology, so instead of us going on a 40-year journey or whatever to find a place that's kind of like Earth, we're just going to reprogram our psychology so that we are only comfortable inside closed metallic spaces. The idea of being on a planet's surface terrifies them and would kill them pretty much instantly. Um, and so now you've got a spacefaring race that looks creepy AF, right? I mean, really creepy. And by the way, they don't have to all look the same. In fact, I think probably every one of them individually modifies himself or herself, as if that even happens anymore. You look at the people who are out there with body modifications, right, with all the piercings and tattoos and all that stuff. No two of them are the same. And when you have the ability to do that on a genetic basis rather than a mechanical basis, I think it would be fashion. I think certain looks would be, ooh, no, I've never seen that done before. I never saw eye stalks on the end of bones before. That's quite a, you know what I mean? You would get that kind of you would get that kind of degeneracy. Degeneracy. Yeah, Road Rider says, Bill, how or why do they, do it? I don't think they do it. I think the idea of doing it makes them a little sick. They certainly don't need to do it. Somebody said, what about how do they, you got to have some bacteria for their gut. It's like, okay, it's not a big reach for a science fiction thing to say. Uh, it's just the food is constructed. You just add whatever enzymes they need that their that gut biology would have done, and so everything about them is sterilized. They reproduce in labs and furthermore, I kind of I kind of like the idea that they are functionally immortal because they have cracked the telomere problem, right? They've cracked it. They are functionally immortal, and I believe I'd like the idea that they can change Their biology, I don't know yet whether or not they could change their look from one to another in the same body. But unlike the people that are saying we could put a human brain inside a artificial intelligence, we talked about that last time. Uh, I don't think that's possible. But if you're a master of genetic engineering, then you really could just, first of all, engineer a body so that you're not, the cells don't have the little death clock in them. There, you eliminate the replication errors that make things get older. The reason we get older and the reason we have like saggy skin or bags under our eyes is because the percentage of cells that are not reproducing themselves accurately increases over time to the point where it just is just so much baggage. But these guys, frankly, if they wanted a new body, wouldn't be tough at all for me to, at least as far as I'm concerned, scientifically and accuracy wise. They just basically design their own body, grow it in a vat, take a year or two or three or five or whatever, and then they simply transplant their brain into this. It's from their own genetic stock, so there's no rejection issues, right? You're not saying you have to make the connection to a an interface. You just basically grow yourself another body. You want to look different? Fantastic. Masterson wants to know if they're queers. Yes, they're all queers. Every one of them. They all look like queers, don't they? And they go around in space like queers. And so, what you got? I'll bring it back one more time. What you got for the colonies is you've got extraordinarily creepy looking alien creatures with a very different psychology and an awful lot of advantages in terms of, well, first of all, being functionally immortal. You get to be better at things. I'm just starting to get things figured out. Road Rider says, do they kill? They don't kill each other. Again, I'm just kind of, some of this I'm just inventing as I go along. But since I was asked, I say, no, they don't kill each other. They've bred intra species aggression out. You just don't have the genes for it. But anything else see, if you live in a sterile environment like that, they realize that they are in a very unique position. They're not machines, but they cannot ever, ever have any contact with any other biology of any kind. Right? All their food is synthetic. All of their environments are sterile, and they can't contact any other form of biology, because if they do, that biology is just going to eat them alive, right? So they have no immune systems, and that tells me that, especially since they know where they come from, they want nothing to do with Earth. You don't need hair. They don't want hair. Hair is for germs. All of it. Sexual attraction gone. No, they're just all intellect. But you would say, well, that breed the ability to kill each other out of it. So they don't kill each other. But anything else they do, they not only kill it, they go looking to kill it, right? Because and kill it at a distance. You're not going to see these guys coming on board your ship in a boarding party, right? One of the things about functional intelligence is it would tend, I think, to make you quite a coward, because you could lose the whole thing. There's a great science fiction series, I forget the name of it now, where the alien, and I forget the name of the guy, but the aliens are called the puppeteers because they've got two things up here, and because they are essentially nearly immortal, everything they do is about their safety, and they're absolute cowards, and the leaders are called the hindmost because the most important individuals are kept in the back, where they're the safest. Larry Niven, yeah. And so they celebrate cowardice, these puppeteers, because they got a lot to lose. And so now you've got these highly advanced, probably more advanced than general stock humanity, highly advanced, extremely different psychologically creatures that probably aren't looking for a fight because that's dangerous, but any intrusion on their area at all is you've got to that threat's got to be sterilized. which is another kind of an old science fiction trope from the Berserker series, where this there's a war and these society creates um, killing machines, and then they kill off all the people that created them, and now these machines go through the galaxy exterminating life of any kind. That's what berserkers do. They just simply go from place to place to place because they see life as their ultimate enemy. And psychologically, that's not a hard thing to do, which is why I just can't believe the arrogance of these people when they say, oh no, all spacefaring life will be friendly. Maybe, probably. But you don't know that. You don't know. So, um, C. King says, why would someone do this over being a cybernetic being? Also, it really does remind me of a praying mantis. It does. There are many reasons to do this over a cybernetic being. They find if you take this, and this is what world building is, right? This is what world building is sketching in the details and making the details believable, not just throwing it at you, but why? Okay, so they're really weird looking. Why? Well, you would have to kind of get to the point where you realize that it is an aesthetic choice for them, and that the farther away that you can get from baseline humans, it's a fashion statement for them. And if you put it that way, that's really kind of good. It's like, why do they look so freaky? Because they think it's fashionable. You should have seen how they looked last year. Um, Ed Smith says, so Bill, why stay human in space? Oh, Steve Whoop says, you misspelled Democrats. Uh, well, now you've got an interesting kind of a background, don't you? Because you've got three different branches, and all of them are mutually exclusive to the other. You've got stock humans and your stock humans, which the protagonists are. The stock humans find the genetic uh, branch to be horrifying, and they find the same thing about the cybernetic branch. Kind of Borg-like, right? The cybernetics are looking at both of them saying, why are you wasting time with flesh and muscle when you can have mechanical eyes, I'll give them anything except for the brain thing. Yeah, I'll give them brain implants. I'll give them the ability to think about things and have them appear like internal series. But the business about uploading consciousness, I just don't see it. Maybe I'll change my mind, but right now I don't see it. But if you go down the technology route and the cyberpunk route, then you get that cyberpunk look, right, where everything is all about human values don't mean human values anymore. In the cyberpunk world, you've got people giving up their eyes because fiber optic connections to the artificial eyes are better. That's a psychological issue. Um, and so they've got their own thing. And of course, the ones I just showed you, they just think that they think that the cybernetics are, it's like a halfway house. It's like, why are you trying to put mechanical things in your body and deal with all the rejection issues and the infection issues and so on when you just simply design the body the way you want it? So now you've got villains. And furthermore, you've got creepy looking aliens that are believable. Johnny Mnemonic, great story. Yes, Johnny Mnemonic. Um, somebody was they made the movie of Johnny Mnemonic. They made it with Keanu Reeves before The Matrix. And Keanu didn't wasn't really known for super intellectual capacity. Johnny Mnemonic's a story about if I've got the title right, it's a story about a guy who has a brain implant and he's carrying information. He's an information courier, and he uploads this information and downloads it and so on, and that's what he does. And somebody once said the idea of Keanu Reeves carrying a great deal of information in his brain was like the idea of Rosie O'Donnell trying to carry a pizza across town or something, something like that. As unlikely as Rosie O'Donnell trying to carry a pizza across town. I thought that was rather funny. Um, so, by the way, if you've got these genetic freaks, there's no reason why they couldn't also genetically modify their own warriors, right? Breed whatever. See, this is the thing I think is interesting. They could breed, they could genetically select anything, but they can't invent it. So they could make expendable bear warriors, right, that go out and do the fighting, and they just determine that these warrior caste of theirs has a certain amount of intelligence and is completely expendable because it doesn't have something else, right? You just basically, well, you just kind of breed them as you go. What kind of threat are we dealing with here? We got these little, we'll make monkeys with, vampire bat fangs and we'll give them some kind of toxin and boom. So all of those possibilities are there. And then Matt's got a great point here because he beat me to it. He says, Matt 2.0 says, I want to know what happened to Matt 1.0. Pure blood banks, are they a thing? I want the protagonists to be regular people because both of these alien branches are repulsive to me. But you could also go further in the opposite direction and say that it's entirely possible that there's a entire human philosophy that says, no, you've got to exterminate both the cybernetics and the genetic branches, right? That they're both abominations and they just need to be killed because they are, what is it where you, it's like Warhammer 40K, right? We must destroy the heretic and the mutant and the xenophobe. That's it, the xenos. We're going to kill all the aliens. We're going to kill heretics, and we're going to kill mutants. Anything's not like us, goodbye. So the more effed up you make the opposing factions in your science fiction story, the more, and this is the entire reason why you do it in the first place, you are trying to show a reflection of the real, of the current, right? You want to make a point about current events. So if you've got aliens like the one I just showed, what you're really doing is you're really making a statement on the body modification crowd here, which is getting more and more popular every day. And then if you want to go after the cyber crowd, you're making a comment on this whole kind of I live through my phone kind of thing, right? You get a chance to take those two qualities and turn them all up to 12. And then you realize, okay, what is it about unaltered humans that makes them superior to both of these branches, which in many ways are in fact superior to us? And that brings you back to the same kind of issue that Star Trek dealt with, and Lord of the Rings dealt with, and the Bible deals with. Why is it that unaltered humans are the soul of the Federation when Vulcans are faster, stronger, and smarter? Why are humans the favorite of Iluvatar when the elves are faster, smarter, stronger? And why does God love humans in a way that he doesn't love his angels who are faster, smarter, and stronger? What is it? What is it about that? I find that personally to be fascinating. And the thing I like most about it is I think certainly in the first two cases and in some kind of speculation I've seen about the angels, the thing that's not only interesting about it is that why is humanity favored, but the superior, by any measure, races, the Vulcans, the elves, and the angels, know that the humans are superior to them in some way. And they can't explain it, and it bothers them a lot. They know, elves know that humans get sick, they die after 30, 40 years. Elves live for thousands of years, never get sick. But but they know that the humans have something that they don't have. And same with the Vulcans, right? The Vulcans are geniuses. They're every one of them are just geniuses. Tolerate heat and they're so much stronger and all the rest of it. So why isn't it a Vulcan Federation? What's missing? What's missing? What's missing from the angels, right? The angels don't have the ability to sin. Well, that's obviously not true in the case uh, of Satan and the fall, but you know what I mean? That's a really interesting angle. There's a lot to explore there, and Steve Whoops in YouTube says, "Brief candle is valued more because it burns brighter." Yes, and it not only burns brighter, but it also burns out. Right? This kind of comes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago with the genetic aliens. If you live forever, is that good? If you live forever, if you had functional immortality and not this technological ability to upload your consciousness into machines, which I find to be exceedingly unlikely, because if you can do that, then you can just back yourself up. It's like a save point in a game, right? I'm just going to save here, and then when I get killed, I'll come back here and start from here again. But if you let's say you don't have that, if you live forever, what does that do? CP Tomes got it right. It makes you risk averse. And then the question is, do you really live, or do you just survive? This is why I have such high respect for people that do. I don't have any respect for daredevils. People who flirt with death. That doesn't. I don't care. I just it doesn't. That's not what I'm talking about. But when I do look at like these guys who do the jet suits, these two guys with the jet things, one of them was killed in a crash, right? It was 26, something like that. But I've seen these guys flying around, and that's about as good as it gets if you like to fly. The guys with the jet engines and they're not. I'm not talking about the flying squirrel guys. I'm talking about this team that's got. They just put a wing on their back and get jet engines. They fly around. I look at them, or the guys in the flying squirrel suits, and you see them going down the side of a mountain and missing things by a couple feet, and you think that would really be cool to have not just the nerve but the willingness to die to do that. Now here's an interesting point brought up by, sorry, it's pale green, Quantum Echo. What a cool name. You like daredevils, but you love test pilots? Question. You don't. Sorry, you don't like daredevils, but you love test pilots? Question mark. I'm so glad you asked. Test pilots are the opposite of daredevils. Test pilots have been so badly portrayed because of lazy writing that people treat test pilots like, all right, we're going to grab our helmet, we're going to go out there and push the outside of the envelope, and if we buy the farm or if we auger in or so on. And I've missed a bunch of super chats. I'm going to interrupt for a second. Jacob James says, love your work, Bill. I've been a fan since PJTV. 28 years old, currently working at Boeing as a functional test tech in Washington. Can't wait to see the rest of D is for Dungeon and the Colony series. You and Clavin are two of my heroes. Thank you very much. I don't know who the other guys you're talking about, but it's very kind of you. I appreciate it, and thank you for the super chat, Joseph. So what does that do to them? Right? It makes them risk averse, and their experience horizon goes down to almost like a two-dimensional line. They never go outside. They don't want to go outside. They don't feel like they're in prison. They have genetically engineered their psychology so that they're comfortable in small pressurized tubes. But the issue about the test pilots is, I, every test pilot I've ever known wants to live a long time and does everything in their power to live a long time. They do dangerous things, but they do dangerous things very, very carefully. And I find that to be almost the opposite of daredevils. They both have a great deal of courage. I personally value that test pilot kind of courage higher than that kind of person that's flirting with death, you know. But no question, they both have physical courage. But the test pilots that I know do everything in their power to make sure that they come back. Um, and I really admire that. So all of this stuff to say that by setting up these antagonists, now we're not talking about science fiction anymore. Now we're just back to fundamental drama. The main issue is, what does your antagonist tell you about yourself? It's good to do the world building to sketch them in, because the more sketched in the antagonists are, the more their difference from your protagonist tells you about your protagonist. That's ultimately what it is. So in Star Trek, you had the Klingons, who had all of the technology that the Federation did, but they were brutal with it. So you needed the Klingons to show how civilized the Federation was, and you needed the Romulans to show how human the Federation was. That's why they did it. Ken Jack Ben. Sorry, it's a vision. Hi, bewildered greetings and salutations from Vallejo, California. Greetings, fellow Californian. We live on the other side of the reason curtain. Um, but Aesop's Retreat says, Bill, you won't find a test pilot hanging from the top of a tower trying to get a selfie. Perfect. Perfect. That's exactly precisely what I'm talking about. Yes, precisely. They don't take stupid risks. Airtechie says, long live the Klingon Empire. But see, you see what I'm saying? The reason that you have the Klingons and the Romulans is not just so you can have space battles, although you need that. You need action. The reason that they were spun off the way they were spun off was because, what do the adversaries tell you about the Federation? Like I said, the Klingons tell you that you don't have to be brutal. You don't have to have an empire. You don't have to be space Nazis. And the Romulans tell you you don't have to be robots either. It's just very good and very clever. And I don't think I've seen an example any better than Star Trek original series when it comes to that kind of thing. Anyway, that's that. It's getting to be 8 o'clock. I've still got stuff to do. I know I haven't taken a single question tonight, and I guess on some level we just have to. I think maybe we need to just have a general understanding that the show's mostly about rants, and we get the questions if we run out of rants. I haven't had anything to eat all day today, and I need to get some food. I've still got a couple hours of work to do here before I go. So I think I'm going to probably wind this one up, and I apologize for not having gotten to it. Dave Big Booty with the Shatner quote, with the Captain Kirk quote. It's not that we're not going to kill; it's just that we're not going to kill today. Not going to kill today. That's it. Eric Blake says, how many weeks since the last episode? I think we missed 3 weeks in a row, consecutively. And I was out of town for one of them. I was sick for one of them. And one of them I was just, something. Hasn't been 2 months. It's been 1 month, I think. So, anyway, so I'm going to get this thing uploaded. I've got to upload a couple of other things, and then I've got some editing to do, and I've still got to get these scripts written and all the rest of this stuff. So I certainly wasn't going to miss 4 in a row. I'll try and do Facebook questions next week. Yeah, sure, that sounds good. So there that is. I'll do it for this edition of the I Has a Sad episode of the Stratosphere studio, which actually cheered me up. Talking to you guys always cheers me up. And even the fact that I say talking to you guys kind of makes me a little delusional. I keep, every now and then, I think this first happened to me like 3 months ago. I just thought, if I was sitting on the couch there, people would think, what the hell is this guy doing? He's having this conversation with a LED board, you know. But it's not. We do it in real time, and if it weren't for the comments, the live comment section, this shall be not what it is. And the viewerships are going up too, so that's something. Oh, uh, I am in all of my free time. First of all, trying to try and be less filled with Adderall withdrawal. But I did the speech on how to out argue the left. We talked about it on the last Stratosphere Lounge. We ended up having to do 5 different restarts because of probably coincidental shutdowns on YouTube, and then on uh, Twitch, and then back on YouTube. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those together. I was going to do a firewall on those, and I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to see how effective it is to do the equivalent of a firewall with just cuts me sitting in the chair, because I have been saying for a long time that it's authenticity now. So I'm going to basically take that argument, how to argue with the left and the electoral stuff. I'm going to cut it down. It's going to look like this, but it's going to be not going to be 2 hours. It's going to be firewallish. And I'm going to put it out and see how it does in terms of views, because the last one got 15,000 views or whatever. So a lot of that is shadow banning, but a lot of it also is that the tastes have changed. So I'm going to see if I can do something that has firewall quality in terms of focus on ideas, and then I want to see what it looks like in this format, which is obviously a lot less formal. Oh, look, ultimately I have to make my members happy, and if they want me in front of the lake of fire, that's great. But I'm very curious to know what would happen to see something like that. It looks in fact, with your eyes closed, it would be a firewall, and then try that with this far less produced but far more authentic take. So we'll see. Oh, thank you, Spanky, with a $10 super chat with cheeseburger plus my cogitation spectacles. It looks like cheeseburger plus like a dessert equals money flying away. Well, thank you for buying me dinner, Spanky. That's very, very nice of you. I appreciate it. So we'll give it a try. We'll see what we do. And look, if it turns out either it doesn't do business or not, then I'll just redo it, because I certainly can write it. I got the notes. All right. Anyway, thanks for cheering me up here, gang. Because I was an hour before we started the show, I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this, but not gonna miss 4 of them. So somebody said the Gordon is closer. Maybe he's closer. If he is, he's moving very slowly. That's the best I can do. Okay. Thanks for joining us. This show's made possible by the members at BillLittle.com, who keep the lights on and all the rest of that happy stuff, and allow me to live this life where I get to talk about these things I've always wanted to do. What a remarkable, astonishing life this is. So for those of you who are members, thank you very much, and as always, thanks for putting up with the delays and the subcompetent issues that sometimes come up. But in any event, we're very grateful, and we will see you on Thursday, I reckon, for this show. But right now, we're going to put an end to this show.